before there is nowhere to stand.
Before there is nowhere to stand, Palestine, Israel, poets respond to the struggle. I'm going to open with my own poem here. This poem is not in the book. It's called These Are My People. These are my people whose bombs fall on children. My uncles, aunts, cousins, namesakes, selves I do not know, whose terrified parents escaped to the Holy Land, howling never, never, never again. Buried their souls in the bulldozer's rubble, planted American trees and learned how to kill. A land without soul is far less than holy, and blind fear spits its fire on those without cover. No wonder we other Jews, safe in America, writhe in our beds night after night facing demons. Come morning we face our own selves. I had the pleasure of meeting Tom Berman when I was invited to do workshops and readings with a group of Israeli poets who write in English. And the group is called Voices Israel. And they have an ongoing poetry contest, and they're quite international in their scope. And the poem that I'm going to read of Tom's is very much, I think, kind of to the essence of what this anthology is about. The hate. The hate is prowling abroad. It has devoured erstwhile saints, waxed fat with the souls of sinners. It grows sleek on the blood of passers-by. It is in the mosques and markets and in the study halls of the righteous settlers. It flies with every stone, swirling in the smoke of the tires and the tear gas clouds. It slides, satiated, through the barbed wire. The hate rides in taxis to indifferent checkposts on the guarded buses, climbing lonely country roads past the olive groves, proffering branches of peace. The hate is warming itself behind the shuttered shops, feeding fat in emergency wards, smiling at the broken bones, fractured hopes, and shattered lives. The hate is quite impartial. In a bounteous season, all manner of worshipers pay homage. The hate is come into its own country. Shall we let it devour all our good portion?
Thank you all for coming out here. I got to Jerusalem in August of 2002, and 4 weeks later, the Second Intifada began and was the first night of High Holy Days. It was Rosh Hashanah. High Holy Days, Jerusalem, October 4th, 2000. Lost in the dry heart of Yerushalayim, God, like a broken messenger, sleeping through a long day's heat, ears ringing with the sobs of children, lies hidden under the shade of a fig tree. Could these be the holy days the Holy One intended us to sanctify in this parched corner of the world? Buses still run on my street. People in the neighborhood mourn their lost soldiers. I am quiet in the little cage of my porch, with my newspapers and cold tea Only photographs and a camera's moving pictures show how blood is spilling across the blistering earth of Palestine, of Yisrael. A shofar wails again and again from the apartment across the road. My ears ache with weariness. I hear the holy days unfolding to the sound of gunfire crackling toward the young bodies of El Fam and Nablus. Wives and mothers are crying, shrieking with rage, beaten and cursing for the lives of their boys whose flesh was torn and shattered by rubber bullets. Last night, Avinu Malkeinu lifted from the throats of the observant while well-armed soldiers aimed their guns at a terrified child near Netzarim instead of at the snipers behind him. Armies of children threw their bodies, their stones, their souls at machine guns, at missiles dropping from the sky. "Death to the Jews," echoed from the west. A fragile ancient alliance ripped apart as windows of stores were broken in Jaffa and on a side road in the north. "God is great," rang out at the point-blank murder of a young father, bringing his old car to be fixed. The main artery of Akko and Svat is closed. I watched young soldiers wearing kippahs supplicate to the Almighty in our pretty wood-paneled shul, while bullets seared the bodies of their brothers guarding Joseph's tomb. Our mother Rachel wept as her resting place was stoned. Yom Kippur looms ahead. Outrage and desolation burns into the street, pelted into the eyes of the world, names of God hurled like fire, like death. The prayers of Yerushalayim from all corners of the world slip like water through a sieve onto the torn hopes of mothers and fathers, their fingers despaired of their music, their voices joined, lamenting life, blessing the eternal. I am quiet on my little porch, wondering if you are hiding under the tree below my balcony, wondering if you expect me to call out your attributes, to fast and wear white, or to rip and rend my clothes.
The first poem I'm going to read is not my own. I'm going to end with my own, written on the Sinai, or shortly after being on the Sinai Peninsula. But I'm going to begin with a poem by Naomi Shihab Nye. And her poem, Jerusalem, begins with an epigraph by someone in Sweden by the name of Tommy Olofsson. And here's the epigraph. "Let's be the same wound if we must bleed. Let's fight side by side, even if the enemy is ourselves. I am yours, you are mine. Jerusalem." I'm not interested in who suffered the most. I'm interested in people getting over it. Once, when my father was a boy, a stone hit him on the head. Hair would never grow there. Our fingers found the tender spot and its riddle. The boy who has fallen stands up. A bucket of pears in his mother's doorway welcomes him home. The pears are not crying. Later, his friend who threw the stone says he was aiming at a bird, and my father starts growing wings. Each carries a tender spot, something our lives forgot to give us. A man builds a house and says, "I am native now." A woman speaks to a tree in place of her son, and olives come. A child's poem says, "I don't like wars. They end up with monuments." He's painting a bird with wings, wide enough to cover 2 roofs at once. Why are we so monumentally slow? Soldiers stalk a pharmacy, big guns, little pills. If you tilt your head just slightly, it's ridiculous. There's a place in my brain where hate won't grow. I touch its riddle, wind and seeds. Something pokes us as we sleep. It's late, but everything comes next.
Okay, I also am not going to read my own poem, and I'm not going to read a poem in the book. I'm going to read my co-editor, Grace Beeler's poem. We went into any crack, any garbage pit, any sewer tunnel, under any loose floorboard, behind any wardrobe, in any cupboard, any barn, any attic, invisible. Almost ghosts already, our shadows boarded boats, going anywhere. Ghosts in America, in Argentina, in Australia, Bolivia, Brazil. We stood against the bright blue walls of Bogota, and our bodies became as blue. The Colombians walked past without looking. In America, we let our daughters be molested by rock and roll. We said, she doesn't even know. Better she should never know. We picked up our books again, when our fingers were firm enough to hold them, and when the light was just right for a moment in the evening or the early morning, we looked nearly solid, except for the wispy tendrils escaping from our fingertips, where we had reached and found emptiness. Our children, they looked like real children in the early years. We could bounce them on our hips, and they would laugh in a way that made us want to howl and raise our fists at God. But we turned and faced the wall and counted to 1,000, because howling would only make a fuss, and the neighbors might hear. The neighbors might wonder. The neighbors might get on the phone with God and report the insubordination. When we were finished counting, we went outside and cleared some of the brush from the yard, made a quiet place to sit by the water. We cooked and fed more than just our own. We taught and wrote poetry and healed the sick, and everything was peaceful until 6:45, when the clock radio clicked on. "Your cousins are killing babies," said Steve Inskeep. "They have rockets. They're shelling the houses of the innocent." "But," we said, still groggy, "we couldn't shoot a gun even if we wanted to. Our fingers would never be solid enough to pull a trigger. How can we be sending rockets?" "I'm serious," said Steve Inskeep. "Listen." And he played a clip of a mother screaming. "I can't listen to this," we said. "I have to go to work." But the next morning he was back, insistent. "They're still at it. They hit a school today." "A school? What are you talking about, Steve? We don't burn books, not ever, you know that. And we don't kill babies. My God, haven't we gotten past that racist stereotype already? We're ghosts, Steve. We don't make a fuss. We can't even have a conversation with our own God out loud." "Yeah, well," said Steve Inskeep, "apparently they have some sort of gelling agent over there. I'm just doing my job, reporting the facts, keeping you updated. 75 more were killed in brutal one-sided attacks today. Don't say I didn't warn you." We stumbled out of bed. We pulled on crumpled jeans and mismatched socks, went around the corner for a coffee and a chocolate scone, which didn't do a damn thing to calm the knots in our stomachs. We went to work, came home, went to bed, woke clammy from another nightmare, people running, fire in the dark, blood everywhere, pulled on the same crumpled jeans and sweaty socks, jammed a shirt over our heads, stumbled downstairs, groped, bleary-eyed, for the telephone. Thank you. I have no home. I saw clouds running away from the hurt. I have no language. Its weight is lighter than a feather. The quill does not write. The ink of the spirit burns on the shore of meaning. The clouds are tears filled with escape and lacking definition. A cloud realizes the beauty she forms, beauty which contains all good things, for whom trees, gardens, and tired young women wait. I have no home. I have a night overripe with sweats caused by numbness all over. Time has grown up on its own without me. In my dream, I asked him what he looks like. My small defeats answered me. So I asked him again, what did he mean? Then I found myself suspended in nothingness, stretched like a string that doesn't belong to an instrument. The wind played me, so did gravity. I was a run of lost notes that had a sad, strong desire to live. Our next reader is Celine.
I'm going to read a poem by Marina Ajaja. This poem is called Reply, and it begins with a quote from Mahmoud Darwish identity card, which I'll read first. Write down that I am an Arab, that my grandfather's vineyards were stolen and all the Arab lands were stolen. And when I'm left to starve, I'll eat anything, even the flesh out of those who stole our land. This poem is called Reply. Write down that I am a Jew from an oppressed people, now known as the oppressor. Write down that I am a Jew with brown hair and green eyes. And for all the gold fillings pulled and piled into mountains, I am changing the landscape. I offer irrigation and orange groves. Write that I share the exile stance. That refugee has always been my name. That we share the same holy places and the same word for peace. Write down that I'm a Jew living in Northwest America, land of green and dampness, and that I reject the desert, the promised land. I reject that law of both peoples, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. I'd rather be mute and blind. Write down that I am a Jew and reject the veil, the wig, and the male god who orders them. I bet that bothers you. I bet you don't like that. And don't bother to write my name. No, Mr., no, Mrs. I'm not interested in formalities, your stalling tactics. Write that this land belongs to no one. Only dust claims the first ownership. And over this dust, we erect a new landscape. Over the bones of Abraham, over the bones of Muhammad's children. Write down that I hate no one and reject oppression. I have walked through the orchards, those lush landscapes, and seen tractors roll down aisles of gleaming fruit. I've heard the prophets scream from the roofs of Jerusalem. I've heard all the dogmatic arguments and prayers at the wall. And for every Jew who stood in the shower line, I write this for you. Hate begets hate, and religion is hypocritical, pitting people against people, and for every Arab who draws a knife. With the same blood I have, insist on justice, and be just yourself. Yes, right at the top of the page, that I'm a Jew with brown hair and green eyes. Write that I'm a Jew and that I don't hate anybody. I have been hungry, but I would rather starve than eat your flesh.
I'm going to read two things. First, a very short piece. It's the dedication to this book. And this is by Joan and Grace. We dedicate this effort to two young Palestinians, Khaldun Samoudi and Ahmad Masalman, who were killed within a week of each other at the same Israeli checkpoint in January 2011, and equally to Rabbi Myron Kinberg, February 1945 to April 1996, whose love for Israel did not stop him from being a tireless and dedicated proponent of justice, peace, and equality in that land. And the poem I'm going to read is by Judy Cronenfeld, and her poem is titled Clean, and there's an epigraph here also. It's 4 lines. Each line appears in order on the side of a truck seen on the freeway. And the truck sign says, Crime Scene Cleaners Incorporated. Homicide, suicide, accidental death. And her poem is titled Clean. Let them come like priests in white robes and tenderly cleanse the buttocks of the 4-year-old who shat in his pants, pressing his ears against the scream of F-16s flying low over Gaza. Order them up for the smashed skull at Haditha. The intestines spill out of back wounds. The graffiti scrawled house where democracy assassinated a family. Let them restore the accidentally killed children fleeing on the road from Marwahim, obeying blasting loudspeakers into their deaths. Order them up for the spattered mall, the hall, the checkpoint, the crossing, the wall. Order them up for the broken-necked girlfriend left to drown in their tub by the returning Marine. Order them up for his crazed pain. Order them up for the porta potty splattered with blood, any soldiers whose wife's bad news is the last strain. Let them, with utmost respect, take down the 3 smart, creative, committed prisoners who hanged themselves with bed sheets and clothes in Guantanamo, their act not desperation, but warfare waged against us. Let them remove the bindings around the necks, the plastic bags over the heads. Let them wash out the shot-through mouths of men revenged. Let them relief the Golden Dome. Let the war presidents and prime ministers and militia leaders for whom war is holy or righteous, abstract, mathematical, even joyous, somehow made clean in the mind. Let each be given 1 small toothbrush and the sentence, scour this blood.
So I'm going to read a relatively long poem that is my attempt at figuring out what happened. So it's called My Homeland, Your Home, an attempt to understand it all. After the Holocaust proved Europe unsafe for Jewish people, the world powers in pity or guilt, and yes, there was heavy Zionist persuasion, that unrelenting need for a home, gave them who had been homeless for something like 2,000 years just a little sliver of Palestine. A homeland, they said, for the Jews. And from all the world over, still shaking in horror and nightmare, not just from the European Holocaust, but before that from centuries of pogroms, and after that, Egypt, Ethiopia, Yemen. Nowhere in all the wide world but finally here. Jews came rushing in, and more Jews and more Jews, dark Jews and pale Jews, old Jews and new Jews, rich Jews and poor Jews, all the despised homeless Jews of the world, searching for selfhood, self-government, home, a land of their own after 2,000 years. In the eyes of the powers that be, it was nothing but a small slice of desert and disease-ridden swamp. But to those who had lived there over the millennia, It was life-giving water, ancestral spirit, olive groves, fig trees, happiness, home. For those who were Jewish, it was a miracle. Their homeland, their own after 2,000 years. For those who were not Jewish, it was tragedy. Their homeland pulled out from under their feet like a tablecloth trick, and they left behind shaking and fragile, wine glasses ready to spill. So move, said the powers that be. After all, they had left them a fine chunk of land over there to the east. Move, said the powers that be. And they brought in their unwanted Jews along with their bulldozers, chainsaws, and submachine guns. Al-Nakba. Israel formed, Palestine raised. A tree severed from its roots can no longer survive. A people so severed can live, yes, but not thrive. Some drifted sadly over the earth, leaves torn from cut branches. Others remained, burning in anger, and anger made threats, which the leaders of that new state called Israel did not take lightly. In defense, seized more land, built homes there and more homes, and again took more land, more and more places for settlers to own, though on it were others, not Jewish, now homeless. Meanwhile, thousands and thousands of immigrant Jews from all the world over kept pouring in, flooding their fast-growing homeland with new pride of ownership, rolled up their sleeves and opened their wallets and those of their relatives all the world over, transforming what used to be one land into another, raising up factories, colleges, cities that mimicked the cities of Europe, raising up fences and walls to ward off those others who still called it home, and would not and will not, they say, ever leave, hurling rocks, bricks, anything handy at the foreign intruders, using their own blood-filled bodies as casings for bombs, willing to die, die and die again, whatever it takes to win back their home. And still from Europe, America, Africa, Asia, more Jewish people and more Jewish people, more and more immigrants, burning with hope, expectation, and pure joy in their homeland, keep coming and coming, willing to kill if that's what it takes, even to die, never, not ever again to be homeless, nor to be slaughtered for weakness, not ever again. And their women are strong, and they give birth to Sabras who know the word home. While the wombs of the homeless, proud Palestinian people remain ever fertile, and new generations are born into sorrow, bitter from birth, tasting salt. Home become prison for those disempowered, without food enough, water, shelter, or voice. While there in the clusters of West Bank Jewish settlements, Ariel, Gosh Etzion, Male Adumim, wide-eyed Jewish children from all the world over, China to Uganda, Morocco to Argentina, are learning songs in Hebrew, songs of sweet fertility, songs of faith and freedom, love, love, love of the land. And this is just one paragraph from Rachel Corey's email to her mom that she wrote on February 27th, 2003. I thought a lot about what you said on the phone about Palestinian violence not helping the situation. 60,000 workers from Rafah worked in Israel 2 years ago. Now only 600 can go to Israel for jobs. Of these 600, many have moved because the 3 checkpoints between here and Ashkelon, the closest city to Israel, make what used to be a 45-minute drive now a 12-hour or impossible journey. In addition, what Rafah identified in 1999 as sources of economic growth are all completely destroyed. The Gaza International Airport, runways demolished, totally closed, the border for trade with Egypt, now with a giant Israeli sniper tower in the middle of the crossing, access to the ocean completely cut off in the last 2 years by a checkpoint, and the Gush Katif settlement. The count of homes destroyed by Yafa since the beginning of this intifada is up around 600. By and large, people with no connection to the resistance, but who happen to live along the border. I think it is maybe official now. Rafah is the poorest place in the world. There used to be a middle class here. Until recently. We also get reports that in the past, Gazan flour shipments to Europe were delayed for 2 weeks at the Erez crossing for security inspections. You can imagine the value of 2-week-old cut flowers in the European market. So that market dried up. And then the bulldozers came and take out people's vegetable farms and gardens. What is left for people? Tell me, if you can think of anything, I can't.
I'm going to read a poem by Mike Maggio called Sunday Morning, Amman. Here in Amman, the church bells ring. There are Christian people here. They are our brothers. They are Ibn Khal. Here in Amman on Al-Farabisi Street, amid umbrellas and T-boys and photocopy machines, there are Palestinian people here. They've come to renew their lives. With passport, ID, and staff in hand, in amber garments, the color of time. They are autumn leaves thrown on the wind. They are our brothers. They are Ibn Ard. Here in Amman, the Muezzin calls, there are Muslim people here, from minaret to minaret. A chorus of voices touches the soul from steeple to steeple. A chorus of bells gathers the souls, bells and voices mingling, rising over the city, crying out to God and the occupied land and holy Jerusalem, where Christians and Muslims, Palestinians alike, and Jews on the West Bank. They are all al-Kitab, Jews on the occupied West Bank. They are our brothers. They are Ibn Am. And I'm going to read a poem together by C.B. Follett called Palestine with Ingrid. Persians, Romans, Ottoman, Turks, British, Jordanians, Israelis. He had a gun. It was a stick.
He aimed at us.
His mother's broom.
It was black.
It was black.
He wanted it to be a gun.
He was 7. Here is his blood. I'm good with a rock.
It's tough duty.
Just a little Palestinian David.
They're good with rocks.
Right between the eyes.
The windshield crazed.
Amid right and things happen.
His Jeep went off the cliff.
We used to be neighbors.
We don't speak.
Work together, borrowed.
Stay on our side of the road.
He can't help me.
Nothing we can do.
Collaborator! I want to go to school.
All classes are canceled.
There are no jobs.
And they want our jobs.
I want to write poetry.
They are rabble.
It's lonely, I'm empty.
Always making trouble.
I'm someone.
I am someone.
We can't go out at night.
We must have curfew.
It presses like iron grates.
For your safety.
There are 14 in my family.
No more than 10 may gather.
So our house was bulldozed.
There must be rules.
Tell me, are there still stars?
And Alicia Ostreicher has written the introduction to this book. Her poem is titled What is Needed After Food. And there's a quotation by Yehuda Amachai. Here's what he says. The darkness doesn't war against the light. It carries us forward to another light. In my land called holy, they won't let eternity be. They divided it into little religions, zoned it for God zones, broken it into fragments of history, sharp and wounding unto death. What is needed after food? And so beautiful it cracks the bones, especially Jerusalem, with the luster of her stones, the hurt in her eyes, and our dreams for her children, a triangle, beauty, despair, hope, and the whole mishpocha, pulling three ways at the same time, like the people in so many families, fighting, but joined at the hip, or call it a sandwich, despair the filling, embraced by the bread of beauty and hope, like a manna we eat every day sent from above. While on earth in Jerusalem, my friends, husband and son, relax from a Sabbath meal like well-fed beasts, happily slumped, watching the aftermath of a game where the Nazareth team has just won and vaulted from the bottom of their league to the top. The players have stripped off their shirts, hugging and dancing, circle dancing, belly dancing, waving at crowds in the stands to make them cheer louder. The coach strips his shirt from his hairy barreled chest, climbs a wire fence, wobbles and waves his hips. When someone asks how he feels about his team, a mix of Jews, Muslims, and one Nigerian, he himself is Druze, he punches the air and roars, I beat them all, I beat Arafat, I beat Sharon, I show them we love each other. We watch a while. The celebration is still going on when we quit to get back to the kitchen, where loaves of beauty and hope stand on the counter, and the cup of despair goes on the shelf. My friend and I, we don't ask for much. We read Amachai. We're not messianic. We don't expect utopia, which is, anyway, another name for a smiling prison. But love is a good idea, we think. Why on earth not? Simple women that we are. Simple women cleaning up the kitchen after one meal to make it ready for the next.
This poem is dedicated to Hannah Senesh. In 1939, Hannah Senesh made Aliyah to Palestine from Hungary. She was a poet and resistance fighter who parachuted into Yugoslavia and with the partisans infiltrated her prior homeland. Her mission was to rescue Jews from Nazi-occupied Hungary. She was eventually captured by the Nazis and shot to death. She was 23. This poem relates to, I wrote this relating to the time I lived in Israel during the first Intifada. Conversation in Caesarea. 1. Hannah, perhaps we could have met among the ruins. If the years weren't between us, I could have listened to you speak of the land, how the hammering, dredging, sowing, fruit picking plucks the strings of David's harp, tears the yellow star forever from our coats, and re-stitches it into the sky. We're above boulevards and dirt roads full of Shabbos dinner, Yehudim stroll. Even if we could have floated together in your Mediterranean before Caesarea became a tourist trap, and recognized that we both feel apart, finding no one to spread before him the white cloth of heart and soul, we would not have been close, because your poems are we and our, mine, I, and their. You refuse the Nazis' clemency, wish to be shot without a blindfold, while I want to die of old age. 2. In the Jerusalem Post is an article, A New Generation of Palestinian Martyrs, about children young as 9, in Ketzivot, Daharia, Ansar 2, bound hand and foot, except to eat or move their bowels. No tent, no showers, no scribbled messages, a loud dispatch. Hannah, sit across the table from me. Give me answers. If I were you, I'd pull myself away from my desk. I know the only poem not absurd is action.